pleased today to welcome Jeff Lawrence, the Secretary of the ACTU, who's come up to speak to the NTEU members today, especially those who are about to initiate rolling industrial action. I just have a few short announcements to make first. Firstly, I want to thank a group of students who agreed to relocate their function so we could use this space today. There's a group of chemical and metallurgical engineering students who are raising funds for a field trip to Chile, who are having a sausage sizzle. They're just around the corner, so if anyone wants to grab a sausage afterwards, you can thank the students who kindly rearranged their activity so that we could use this amphitheatre space. And I especially want to thank those members in Information Technology Services, School of Education and the School of Languages and Comparative Cultural Studies who've agreed to be the first cabs off the rank this week as the first groups to undertake rolling industrial action in accordance with the resolution 2 weeks ago. And then on Thursday we've got political science and the Australian Centre for the Right to Protect and Economics taking their indefinite stoppages this Thursday, and there'll be other groups going out next week. So anyone here from other schools and centres, organisational units, talk to your colleagues and decide what time would make a good splash for your indefinite stoppage, and let Michael McNally know. It's very opportune that Jeff Lawrence is in Brisbane at the moment. Obviously, I think his activities here are related to the election campaign and the threat of a Work Choices Mark II if Tony Abbott gets in. As we all know, it won't be called that. What isn't widely known outside the universities is that Work Choices had a test run in universities. It was called the Higher Education Workplace Relations Requirements. The NTEU and the CFMEU were the only two unions that were targeted for exceptional legislation by the former Howard government before Work Choices, or along with Work Choices. We got the so-called HEWAs, the Higher Education Workplace Relations Requirements, whereby universities were threatened with defunding, with losing millions of dollars if the unions didn't write themselves out of their own agreements. And it's taken us 2 years to eliminate the sort of work choices for universities from our collective agreement, and we're still struggling on the pay, as everyone here knows. The thought that I'll have to go and do it all over again if Tony Abbott gets in just doesn't bear thinking about. I'm not thinking about it. We just have to work that it doesn't happen. Having given that brief introduction, I'm very pleased to welcome today the Secretary of the ACTU, Jeff Lawrence.
Thanks, Sam. It's great to be here, particularly on this day when you're about to embark on a campaign to get wages justice. And as Andrew said, all of these things take time. It is so hard to actually turn a ship around, and that's one of the questions that, of course, we're looking at on Saturday. Look, I know that there are lots and lots of issues in this election, and whether it be climate change or national broadband or education funding or health funding, all of the issues that confront us. But I must say, as unions and as workers, of course, our first point of emphasis is what we do at work. And so it's not surprising, therefore, that unions, the ACTU and unions overall, including your union, the NTEU, have been out there talking about the question of industrial relations and the danger that there is of a return to work choices. And we've been running ads, of course, and hopefully you've seen those. We've had activity on the ground. We've had the use of the website. We've had radio ads. It's not quite the same effort as we had in 2007. But I think given the circumstances and given the resources that we've had, it's pretty good. And the reason, of course, we've been doing it is that this election is a considerable threat to all that we've achieved. And having gone through the Your Rights at Work campaign in 2005, 2006, 2007, having defeated the Howard government when work choices was, of course, a very important issue, everybody now concedes that it was one of the main reasons why the Howard government was defeated. We just can't afford to go back. And you in the university sector, the higher education sector, know, I think, almost more than anybody else, the impact that bad industrial legislation and bad policy tied to the funding power of the federal government, what a negative influence that can be. And so really what we've been just seeking to do is to get the facts out there to people and to explain the issues that are really in contest here. Let's never forget that in 2004, John Howard and all the rest of the government at that stage said nothing about their intentions with respect to work choices. The 2004 election took place, and then almost by chance they won the Senate, and then given that opportunity they proceeded with their ideological agenda. All of the things that the H.R. Nichols Society and all of those other people in the mining industry had been urging them to do for a long time, they had their opportunity and they went for it. And so that's why we've been warning now in this election, when nothing is really being said about industrial relations, of what can happen. The truth is, as has been pointed out, between 2001 and 2003, Tony Abbott was Industrial Relations Minister. And it was Tony Abbott as Industrial Relations Minister that actually laid the foundations for work choices. He took steps to take away unfair dismissal rights. He took steps to restrict the way in which bargaining could take place. In every industrial dispute, he was actually in there as a minister intervening against the union and against workers. And very importantly, in this sector, in the higher education sector, he actually used the funding power of the federal government to implement the agenda. And that continued, as I said, when they had the opportunity to put that into legislative form, it resulted in work choices. And then, ever since he's been leader, in the speech that he made when he became leader, in his budget reply speech, in every public utterance that he or Erica Betts actually made over the period since he's been leader, they talked about policies which actually incorporated the worst aspects of work choices. A return to restrictions on access to unfair dismissal, individual contracts or increased flexibility or use of it, flexibility provisions to do the same thing as Australian workplace agreements did. Restrictions on the right to organise, restrictions on the right to get a collective agreement. All of those things were the things that they talked about. But of course, once the election was called and they realised this was a negative from their point of view politically, he then comes up with this unbelievable statement, not just unbelievable, but inconsistent statement that work choices is dead, it's buried and it's cremated all at the same time. But then actually the same day, Erica Betts, who seems to have gone missing in Tasmania, actually went there last weekend to try and find him. He's the Shadow Minister for Workplace Relations, but we haven't heard from him in this campaign. And of course, the reason that we haven't heard from him is every time he opens his mouth, he gets them into strife. And he said, well, they're only going to tweak the legislation, whatever that might mean. The next day, they actually announced a policy about unions having to pay for union elections, which requires a change to the Fair Work Act. So that's the extent of this really unbelievable, I think, assertion, and an assertion which actually is contrary to all that we really know they believe. As well as that there is lots that they can do to implement effectively work choices without actually changing the legislation. So even if you believe what they say about not changing the Fair Work Act, and I don't, but even if you believe that, there's actually 198 sections of the Fair Work Act that provide for regulations or administrative action to implement a range of policy changes. So in mid-July, I wrote to Abbott and to Betts pointing this out and listing all of those matters. I've had no response.